So we've talked about the context, our Canadian context of ethics. We've had some examples of what that looks like. We do it every day, all that kind of stuff. So part of the tension that I'm finding in Canada that seems to be surfacing more and more, especially as some of the government laws are being changed and moved a little bit, is the situation with MAiD, right? And as we were talking earlier, I mean, this is not our only ethical situation, but this is one of them, and it's one that affects a lot of people. And a lot of people are looking for answers. So we're gonna tackle the conversation of MAiD, and here's where the tension comes in my mind as we've been talking. Is it in our manual? You know, as I was reading through this, I was going over all the MAiD statistics and all of that in the office, and the last word on euthanasia in our manual, and it's paragraph 30.5 on page 53, and over on 54 it ends. Last sentence is this: we urge our people to oppose all efforts to legalize euthanasia. And so when we view this through the lens of the church, when we view this through the lens of pastors who have been asked the question before ordination, before they get their credential, will you do everything, in alignment with the manual? Will you, uphold it? And if there ever comes a time then you can't, will you submit your credential back to the church? That's, roughly what is asked. So
it's stated in the ordination.
One question just before we get too far along, just in case there's people listening who may not make the connection that euthanasia is, or agrees that euthanasia and MAiD are the same. Would you elaborate on that a little bit? How are you linking those two things?
yes, I will, Rob. and this is how I'll do it. Rob, would you tell us what the difference between euthanasia and MAiD is?
Well, you're the one that wanted to talk about it. No.
Yeah, that's right.
I think earlier we were talking about it, and it's, basically on some of the internal logic of the manual and the statement around that,
right,
around a medical intervention to bring end of life.
Right.
And so, but I think it wouldn't be hard to find those who would want to keep those two things separate.
Right.
And if you could just speak to why
the
manual doesn't allow us to do that.
Okay, so what's the definition of euthanasia? What does that even mean?
It would be bringing to death by some technology prior to a normal death. That's what euthanasia. You're
Okay.
bringing death into your life to end it before
natural causes.
So if you wrote your obituary and said you died of some form of cancer,
okay,
in MAiD you say you died with medical intervention.
Okay. So my very first church. I'm going to tell you a story.
Yeah.
My very first church. Both people have passed away. Really good friends of mine. He was 80. She was 79 at the time. He had cancer. He was unconscious now, on the machines. The doctor came to her and said, called her by name, said, he's passed. There's no brain activity. We need to unplug him. And she looked at me and she said, what do you think?
Yep.
I didn't know anything about this when I graduated, when I was, there I was, and in an ethical situation that happens every day, right? And so I said to her, well, let's pray about it. That's how I said, because I didn't know. I was wanting the Lord's help, but I also wanted some time, because the doctor was saying, let's do it now. In other words, he needs the bed. It was some kind of thing.
Yep.
And so in the end of all that, she said, okay, let's do it. They pulled the plug, and he lived for another 30 minutes in the most terrible of ways.
Yep.
And she was there. She wouldn't leave. I said, we got to go. We can't. No, she said, I'm going to stay with him until he's done. And in my mind, I've never quite come to grips with, was that euthanasia? The body was dying, and they took away the medical assistance of living.
Yep.
Right?
Technology.
So was that euthanasia? Mm-hmm. I don't know. But see, there's a huge question here that we somehow need to ask. Medicine allows us to live longer. Mm-hmm. As soon as you remove the medicine, natural things begin to happen.
Yep. Yep.
So in this this conversation of euthanasia or MAiD, somewhere along the lines, there's medical intervention that's either causing you to
Yeah.
live or
Yeah.
to die.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So,
See, what you're discussing is technology that's got beyond the church's decisions.
sure, yeah, that's right.
And it advances so fast,
Yeah,
it's not uncommon that if there's a car accident, you hook the person up to keep them alive, and then the person's declared brain dead.
right.
The hospital cannot disconnect that person because someone has to make the decision.
Right.
Otherwise, the hospital gets sued.
Right.
Or there's direction on a driver's license of DNR.
Yeah, there's all sorts
Yeah.
of things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So family member, they always want a family member, not an outsider, has to come in and say,
Right.
plug it in continually, and just that person exists.
Right. Right.
Right.
So those are major ethical decisions.
Those are major.
Now,
Right.
the manual helps us with it because in the next section after, or in that same
Uh-huh.
section, the church allows for allowing natural causes to take its
Right.
course.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So I think we got to define our terms carefully.
Okay, let me ask you this. Since we're talking about that. Is euthanasia capital punishment?
The general view of capital punishment is someone has committed a crime. They didn't decide and say, I want to be hung up or electrified to death with capital punishment. They didn't say that. The
Right.
justice system said that.
Right.
So with
Okay.
MAiD, that person is saying, I want
Yep.
to bring life to an end.
Okay.
So it's a different decision-making process.
Right. Okay. Okay. So then, does that paragraph in the manual not apply to MAiD?
No, it does. It's a direct opposition to MAiD.
Because the piece that I think is highlighted in that manual statement is the idea of an intentional, preemptive end of life.
Yeah.
Okay.
Chosen, self-selected by the individual.
Right.
My concern with linking euthanasia and MAiD together is euthanasia isn't always the choice of an individual. Like it really defends. We've got to be careful in how we define this term euthanasia.
Okay. Okay. So euthanasia happens.
It seems like it's a broader category to me in my mind because that term has been used to
Okay.
describe the work of Hitler in Nazi Germany,
Right.
and that's
right.
not the same as MAiD.
Right. Okay. Well, let's talk about MAiD.
Yeah.
In Canada. So there's actually three parts to this conversation here now then, because there is the whole idea of those outside the church and the ethical decisions we make in judging or not judging, right? And not judging is the way to be. But we need to talk about that. And then the second one is people in the church who are facing the challenges of making this decision
Yep.
personally for themselves.
Yep.
The third one is how do families respond?
Yep.
Right. That's so there's the three things. that we
Families
need-
within the church.
families within the
Yep,
church
Yep.
of the person who's asking,
Yep.
who's deciding
Yep.
that they're going to do that. You know,
Yeah.
what is
Yeah.
their response from
Yeah.
a Christian, Nazarene, Wesleyan
Yep.
holiness,
Yep.
theological perspective.
Yep.
That's kind of where we're
Well, I think
tackle those three.
Okay.
I think fundamental, what's shared across all three is human volition and the ability to choose something for themselves. And we know that that's what it means to be made in the image of God, is to have that some level of moral agency. Clearly, they can choose something to cause a particular outcome. So there is that, and I think folks need to accept that, whether it's our own children, for instance, we do the best to raise them, and then they can make a choice or a series of choices that would be out of a line with what we taught and raised them to be and to think about. So I think when we think about whether it's people in the church or outside of the church, that's there, and fundamentally it's important for us to learn to still love people, even though that they may make choices that we would completely disagree with, but not just love them, but to actually still show love
Right.
in the midst of
Okay,
decision-making.
so that's
Yeah.
before you go on anymore. That's a really interesting thing. So what does that even mean to still love people?
So, for instance, when it comes to LGBTQ issues, I know we're not talking about that,
Sure.
but that's
an ethical question.
Another situation where if somebody chooses to live a gay lifestyle, family members who disagree with that, it's not uncommon for that family member to be marginalized and isolated and just largely ignored. And I feel with in MAiD, holiness people and some strains of evangelicalism, the mark and the badge of devotion is to make a strong statement about something and to live out that strong opposition in any way possible. And usually that results in speaking ill of people who've made a decision that we disagree with and then not associating with them at all.
Right.
And I feel as holiness people with heart purity, where love is the driving factor, we can't follow that pathway.
Right. So I'm going to ask Dave that same question because what you touched on was a difference in North American holiness movement, we'll say, or American holiness, but how does Wesleyan holiness match up with that whole what he just said?
Okay, here would be my view on this. Let's suppose I was the pastor of a church.
Okay.
And one of the members told me we're going to use MAiD. Regardless of the church's position or your position.
Right.
In the heart holiness idea, you're still going to love that person. You don't walk away. It's going to be the hardest thing I think a pastor can go through. If you, say, have a person who's not going to choose MAiD, the pastor walking that person through the throes of death can't be much harder than that.
Right, right.
I mean, you have to watch, and if the pastor isn't willing to do that, then I think you should leave the ministry. If you don't want to watch people die, when our church supports natural death, then just leave the ministry. Go do something else. That's got to be a real tough one on any pastor. But the same thing goes for a member who I can picture chooses MAiD, says, I'm not going through that. The definition of ethics is the good life. The good life is over. I'll bring it to an end.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And in fact, Gaines mentions Aristotle's definition of virtue or ethics is the good life. When you think that life is over, bring it to an end. That's really what MAiD is trying to say. The good life is done. Stop it. That's the whole ethical.
So do you think the pastor should still journey in the same way with that person who makes the choice?
Yep, but I suspect this, they'll ignore you.
Who? The people?
The person who's going through MAiD.
Oh, no, they won't.
You think they will invite the pastor in?
Yeah. If they knew someone would be with them and love them
Okay,
through this, they would.
Okay.
Yeah. And see, and that's part of the problem with Christian ethics right now is I think you had said it, Rob, that there's this image that as holiness people, we got to be tough, strong, short hair, tight suits, up ties on, the whole deal. But because we defined ourselves in the negative, as we were saying in the last session, versus defining ourselves from a heart of love, which is a Wesleyan holiness perspective. And that's where we need to be drawing this to.
Yeah,
Right.
see, I made my statement because I've been with Nazarenes who've had abortions.
Sure.
But I only know after.
Oh, okay.
They don't tell me before.
Okay.
Right.
Because they think I'll be condemning them
Right.
for doing this because it's against the manual,
Right.
against our church.
Right.
So I will know only after what's happened to
Right.
them.
Right.
And I would be concerned that people choosing MAiD, if our church has a statement that's clear
Right.
to me,
Right.
and the pastor says, I have to hand in my credentials if I show support,
Right. Right.
they're not likely to say,
Yeah.
this isn't your battle, and you don't hand in your credentials over this.
Right.
Right.
Okay. So let's go back to the MAiD issue.
Yeah.
So we got the three components of it. We've got the two that are most that I'm most interested in talking about is the person who's going to make that decision
Yep. Yep.
and the family.
Yep.
And I'm including into the family a pastor, because only the pastor who is like a family to them will be invited into that, or to be
Exactly,
asked to
yeah,
be a part of
yeah,
it. Right?
okay,
That's to your
yeah.
definition, Dave. I agree
Yeah.
with that. So let's talk a little bit about that. What? Give me a scenario in your mind of a godly way to approach both of these two situations. And Rob, give us a perspective of the age group coming up now that you deal with at the university.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
a good
yeah.
one. That's
yeah,
a good one.
yeah.
I would say generally, and this isn't specific to Ambrose or anything, just my read of the 18 to 24-year-old would be the individual choice of the person is of paramount importance. And so an institution or a tradition dictating a certain course of action for many students, I would say, would be more of a challenge. Certainly outside of the church, that's the case. Now within the church, I would say it's a little more mixed. It would. I don't think you could kind of typecast or stereotype a better example. Yet, yes, all the Gen Zers that have been raised in the church will accept the manual teaching on this, because it pushes so much against the cultural norm, even the law in this case. Like
Right.
there's the two are at odds, what's permissible in the law and what's prohibited within our own ecclesial structure. So it would be hit and miss. And I think, though, the church doesn't do any favors by not having conversations like these, where at least even if young people would disagree with the statements in the manual, they could at least have an opportunity to ask questions about them. And denominational leaders, I think it's important for them to demonstrate to youth why this matters and why it matters from a biblical theological perspective. That human life matters, and it's a gift from God, and we don't treat it in the way that the world would necessarily suggest.
So is this is this part of the whole idea of my truth is paramount? It's my truth, right?
Yes, I think that
And
part of it.
the manual, what we would say in the Nazarene church, growing up, it was that truth governs my truth, but now it's my truth governs all my decisions of my.
I would want to nuance it a little bit, because
Yeah?
I think that individualism isn't quite like it was, say, in the earlier parts of like what we would call postmodernity, because of the influence of social media and cancel culture and these sorts of things. There is more of I would say, a corporate personality at work, where in the culture today, where I think young people think very carefully about the statements that they make online, especially if they could be seen to be odds with the prevailing culture, or seem to be, and rightfully so in this case, for instance, around racism, or maybe though speaking out their own moral or religious convictions. I think those things are challenging for this group, because their words are immediately broadcast to hundreds of people, thousands of people, depending on how many followers they have. And so there is what is true for me is my truth is now conditioned in a different sort of way because of technology.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me ask you one more point to this, and I'm going to ask you, Dave, for Wesleyan holiness perspective on this from your point of view. So we have, first of all, the person who's considering MAiD, say, in this generation that you're speaking of, and it's their understanding of their truth in this moment that's their guiding principle.
Yeah.
What about the people who are around them? Like how does a mom or dad come to grips with this? Like where do they fall in this? Like what could their response be? I'm almost at a loss of words because I would have such trauma if one of my kids
Yeah.
said to me,
Yeah.
Dad, I'm going to do this. Now, maybe it's situational too.
No, and I think I think for me it's very situational because it depends on, is it a physical diagnosis, an emotional, or a mental health diagnosis. Like, not to excuse one or the other, but there is a situation that defines what's going on and how we need to think about it. But for me, I think it kind of goes back to what I said earlier. It's important that in the case of our children, been raised in the church, we as parents are in the church, that we still sit with our kids and make space for conversation about this and why. I mean, even though they've declared to make the decision, they still haven't followed through with the decision. So there's always room for dialogue, and it has to be done in a non-judgmental way, even though we'll be wanting to render judgment and say, you're making a bad choice, but that doesn't kind of create within youth a feeling that, this is a safe environment for me to think out loud about this. So it's really important for us as the church not to lead with judgment, but to lead with non-judgment, as hard as that may be sometimes, to make space for conversation.
Okay, that's a good answer. So Dave, the same two questions. And from a Wesleyan holiness perspective, and why we're having this conversation from a Wesleyan holiness perspective is because that's where our church is at, right? We're addressing the issues here, and so we're following kind of the pathway of John Wesley down this road of heart holiness, and so I'm not asking what would Wesley do, but I am kind of asking that question. But I'm asking someone who's on the pathway of heart holiness, getting closer and closer to God, to, for them to understand and find out, what does that mean from a Wesleyan holiness perspective? Does that make sense?
It does. The Wesleyan holiness perspective turns us all into pastors. Some are just ordained.
Okay.
But you see, it's love of God and love of neighbor.
Right.
Wesley kept repeating Jesus on that. What should I do? Well, it's love of God and love of neighbor.
Okay.
He wasn't rigid on what that meant, as Jesus wasn't.
Right.
So I believe this. I grew up in the 60s. Can you imagine my parents trying to figure out the Beatles?
In the 60s?
In the 60s? They were completely dumbfounded by it. But we
What
were
does that
being
even
raised
mean?
on that.
Yeah.
We were raised on that. I wore eventually long hair. My dad couldn't fathom this lifestyle, but I grew up there, so when I'm having teenagers, I've already been through that. And I have a slightly different perspective on some of this than my dad or my mom did. Both my children are in the church today, but they were educated in secular universities because of the strength of the Wesleyan Holiness Church. It gave them integrity in their life, and they saw it being lived out in the church.
The person then who's contemplating MAiD.
Yeah.
Okay, so getting to them there, the person who's contemplating MAiD, they're following along a path of heart holiness. I'm gonna have an example. It's not a real one; it's just made up. But they're in terrible pain.
Yeah.
The doctor has said you've got weeks.
Yeah.
You don't have months. You've got weeks.
Yeah.
And someone comes around and says we have MAiD.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know that the law would allow that. It has to be pre-planned.
Yeah, I guess it.
Yeah,
3 weeks, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. But the doctor will say we can fill you up with heroin, make you an addict for the last part of your life.
Well, you won't have any pain.
And there'll be no pain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you'll be an addict.
Yeah.
But does it matter? Because you're going to die.
Yeah.
Uh,
So okay, so
so-
that's
so-
a situational ethics
Yeah,
situation.
this is what creates. Once we make a solution, we only create another problem.
Yeah.
And we just, that's part of the ethical issue, is you find the solution, but you've only created another problem because of your solution. But you still have to make a decision.
Yeah, and I think
You just have to do it.
when you think about somebody, okay, if they're in a massive amount of physical pain, so they're dying, and maybe not a few weeks, but say a couple months, so MAiD's a definite possibility there. Somebody has spoken, they're just ruminating on it, or maybe they've decided to do it. But the fact that they've invited you in to this conversation, you have room to speak about it, I think we wouldn't be doing our job as pastors not to, in a good way, talk about the implications of MAiD and from a biblical perspective. But it's challenging, though, because pain for them, strong emotions, caused by pain, frustration, bitterness. Why did these things happen to me? When people have those sorts of emotions kind of coursing through their system, their ability to think rationally and theologically in a moment is going to be very challenging. And that's where you would get people maybe being angry. How dare you kind of raise this idea or challenge me on it? So, but I think you've got to read the situation, pray, and ask for the Spirit's guidance in those moments, because it's hard to do, theology, textbook theology, if you will, when somebody's like journeying deep pain, whether that's emotional, physical in that moment, and to theologize. Maybe it's better that, you speak if you feel you have space to do that, but to be present is probably the more important thing at that point in time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's. I can't emphasize enough the importance of presence.
Okay, so that really touches on the last one of those three, is the ministry of presence
Yeah.
in the situation of
Yeah.
making these decisions.
Yeah.
And it's the heart holiness that takes you there. It's the love of neighbor, love of child, love of parent, love of whoever. It's love for God, and you represent God in that situation. And I've often thought in the context of MAiD, where Jesus said, the kingdom of God has come near, and if the kingdom of God is within us,
That's right.
that then we have an opportunity to manifest the kingdom of God to those closest around us in the situations.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's hard. I wouldn't use somebody on a deathbed or somebody who's made a decision to use MAiD to win a cultural war in that moment.
Probably not.
I think that would be ill-advised.
Yeah.
And there's other venues and opportunities to take this up, and the church needs to have those conversations.
Right. Okay, so one last question. Think people trust the church enough to do this? To have these conversations?
Yeah, well, that's just based on their experience of what they've been through with the church. Some people have an incredibly positive response to saying church.
Right.
Unfortunately, there's been a few, probably more than a few, who've had a not so pleasant experience, but they don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
Right.
So they're not going to ask the church to be involved.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying then is that if the relationship is built between pastor and people, or Christian and Christian, then there's a space somewhere in there that's safe.
Yeah.
And then the church can, if the people wanted it.
And I think young people today really value when they see institutions making an effort, even though it may not be what they thought it should be, or maybe the conversation was a waste of time, whatever the case may be. But the fact that the church is trying to make space for conversations, I think that's huge. Where we run into what brings us into the realm of irrelevance and not having young people in the church anymore is just not caring or living as though all of these cultural difficulties are basically defining culture, even for people outside of the church, and yet, you can show up on a Sunday morning and it's like you enter a theological bubble where it just doesn't seem like there's any problem out in the world on social, political issues. Yes, we talk about personal sin and the struggles and laying things down at God's feet, but where's the space for actually taking up the things that fill social media, for instance.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
But my quick response is young people just want a church with integrity,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
agreement.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
They
a
don't
whole
have
nother-
to agree. They just want to see it in
that will be a whole other topic.
Yeah. That's a
Well,
good point.
yeah.
That is a good point.